We are enjoying ourselves.
Welcome to Out of Africa. I'm here with Dr. Darius Mann, President and CEO of AFRICARE, one of the premier leading non-governmental organizations in the United States and all over the world, particularly in Africa. And also with Steve McDonald, Consulting Director of the Africa Program and the Project on Leadership and Building State Capacity at the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Scholars in Washington, D.C. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much.
This is a great day, I think, for the Out of Africa program because the topics that you have brought to the table about connecting Africa policy and Africa development, I think, are really quite interesting given all that's going on today. Why don't we start with you, Dr. Mann? Tell us a little bit about AFRICARE and some of the things that you see are the challenges, the good and the bad, I guess, with development and where you'd like to see development go.
Well, AFRICARE is having a very big year this year. This is our 40th anniversary. We were formed 4 decades ago in response to the drought in the Sahel. We're now operating in about more than 30 countries now, and we provide about $1 billion of assistance across the continent, helping to improve the lives of millions. Our focus has been on food security and agriculture for decades. We've also focused heavily on health, especially the pandemic of HIV/AIDS and the scourge of malaria. Plus, integrated in everything that we do, given our origins out of the drought, is a focus on water.
Well, that's, I think, really interesting. I think the development issues for many are a bit confusing. What are some of the innovative projects that you have that deal with water, agriculture, and development? Oh,
there are a number of examples I could give you, but let me start with a project that is focused on empowering women. Which for us is key, whether you are looking at agriculture or the challenge of health or HIV/AIDS. We have been doing a lot of work with improving agricultural productivity, focusing on women farmers, helping them to increase their yields, to form cooperatives that have access to markets, access to financing, so that they can substantially expand their links to markets, increase their incomes. One of the great impacts that that's had, of course, is to improve child nutrition.
Well, child nutrition, I think, is really very important. We have this tremendous youth bulge in Africa across the continent. And I think focusing on youth is so important, and particularly child health. I want to turn to Mr. McDonald, to Steve. I know we've known each other for many years, and you're definitely an expert in your field in terms of conflict resolution and governance. And I want you to tell us a little bit about what your programs do at the Woodrow Wilson Center, but also sort of talk a little bit about how you see policy and development, some of the things that Dr. Mann has just highlighted, connecting to what you do.
Okay. Thank you, Robin. Yes, we have known each other a long time, and it's so good to see you again. But I must start with a little bit of a pitch for the Woodrow Wilson Center, because most people are probably not familiar with it. It's the official living memorial to former President Woodrow Wilson, and it's because he was such a prominent academic, the only PhD to ever that we ever had as a president. He felt very strongly about bringing together the world of ideas and the world of policy. And that's what the Woodrow Wilson Center is there for, primarily. It's a true think tank, has a very large scholars program, a public policy outreach program, publications, and et cetera. Now, I in the Africa program and the Leadership and Building State Capacity Project do those things as well, reaching out to Congress, to White House, to the State Department to help engage and inform and work with them on various issues related to Africa. But we also have a very special niche that we're involved in that began with a former colleague of mine who I think you know quite well, former Congressman Howard Wolpe, and Special Envoy to the Great Lakes region of Africa. And he and I brought a project to the Woodrow Wilson Center based on rebuilding the trust and collaborative capacity of leadership in post-conflict societies. It was first focused on Burundi, and then we later were invited into the Democratic Republic of Congo and then into Liberia, where we are running ongoing programs in all 3 countries. And sort of to respond to the last part of your question, I think I feel very strongly actually that as we look at the important development agendas that you're dealing with, Darius, and others, and governance agendas and recovery agendas in terms of post-conflict society in particular, that this element of post-conflict peace building, reconciliation, a lot of words are used to describe it, but bringing people together to make them understand their interdependence, to work with them and with the tools and the skills and the relationship building that will allow them to further the agendas of recovery, of development, of governance is pretty essential.
Well, I think that you're absolutely right. There are some essential elements, but I think what our audience would like to hear is really some examples of where you think things are going right today in conflict resolution and conflict management. And then also, Dr. Mans, Darius, can you then connect some of the things that AFRICARE is doing to address some of the things you think are going correctly on development? So, Steve, we'll start with you.
Well, in the countries where I'm involved most intimately, I think those are the ones I better talk about because I know something about them. Although, as you know, I've been around Africa for 40 years, and I could maybe talk about everybody a little bit.
Yes.
But I think, for instance, Burundi is a good example, where the peace agreement was signed in the year 2000. A transitional government was set in place. War started again. They actually went back to war. The ceasefire was not finally signed until November of 2004. A great deal of disruption and loss of life in the between time. We've now been through 2 democratic elections, both of which had their problems, but for the most part were free and fair and declared so. We've had a popularly elected government 2 times in a row. Anyone who knows Burundi and is watching it from afar understands that it's still a very fragile society. It's one of the poorest countries on earth. It's a hippie country, and has the development agenda hasn't even begun to be addressed. But one thing that has happened through the kind of interventions that we were intimately involved in, but others as well, I don't just take credit for the Woodrow Wilson Center's program here, that worked with integrating the military, with getting through the demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration exercises, that has created a situation where in the last elections, for instance, in 2010, you actually had most of the opposition parties who boycotted the second round of elections because they felt the first round was not done fairly, and then they excluded themselves therefore from the national legislature because they didn't run for office. And there was a great deal of tension around that. A few years before, what would have happened then, of course, would have been army intervention, broken down along ethnic lines, and things might have gotten extremely dicey. Still a tense situation. Politically, it's not solved. One doesn't know exactly what the future will hold, but the country has stayed together. There's been no violence around it, and that is a key thing.